This is the Classical Ideas Podcast. Today's episode comes with a special offer from the publishing house New World Library. New World Library, home to authors like Joseph Campbell, Alan Watts, Eckhart Tolle, Shakti Gawain, and tons more, is currently running a big sale that offers 50% off every book they publish, plus free shipping on orders $20 or more. Head to newworldlibrary.com, check out some amazing books, and enter the offer code FRIENDS at checkout. The offer expires on Wednesday, December 20th, 2017. Sorry to anyone who misses this sale by downloading the episode later. I'm currently loading Joseph Campbell and Alan Watts books into my cart like a madman for roughly $7 a piece. Go snag some awesome gifts, folks. The gift of wisdom and contemplation is the best gift you can give, if you ask me. On to the show. So last year in my religions class, I had 22 guest speakers in a single school year. My classes met people from many different religions, wrote letters back and forth with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists, and Skyped with a renowned translator of classical literature. Each time we met such folks, I left the class feeling really amazed that so many people were willing to give their time and energy to visiting with me and my students to talk about their philosophies of life. And it continues to amaze me that so many people said yes to my invitation to my podcast and to come and visit in the class. And I am immensely grateful. So today's guest is someone that I have been excitedly working with to coordinate guests for this show. She handles the publicity for renowned authors in the spiritual world. And I worked with her to schedule the fantastic Brad Warner Soto Zen Buddhism episode for episode number 22. Kim Corbin and I emailed back and forth a whole bunch, and then I realized that she has her own podcast. So then I listened to her show, several episodes. It's called New World Now, and I found it to be a really excellent podcast. I realized I had a lot of great questions about what it's like to work for a spirituality publishing company, and also what her favorite part about hosting a podcast is. So I invited her on, and we had a good time. Kim Skipper Corbin is the host of the New World Now podcast at New World Library, where she serves as a senior publicist and social media manager. She has also been a passionate promoter of the benefits of adult skipping since 1999 via her iskip.com website, which has been featured in Time, Newsweek, and People magazines. Her website, iskip.com, offers an information source and gathering place for people all over the world who enjoy a good skip. And remember, New World Library is currently running a sale that offers 50% off every book they publish, plus free shipping on orders $20 or more. And this is Kim Corbin's company. This is where she works. And she wanted me to make sure that I offer this to listeners of the podcast. So the offer code at checkout is FRIENDS, and the offer expires on Wednesday, December 20th, 2017. Without further ado, I welcome Kim Corbin. Welcome to the Classical Ideas Podcast. My guest today is Kim Corbin. Kim is the host of the podcast New World Now and is a senior publicist with the publishing company New World Library, which is the publishing home to authors like Brad Warner, who was on this show in episode 22, as well as many others like Shakti Gawain, Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell, and many more. Kim, thank you for coming on the Classical Ideas Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm curious if you can just kind of go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and talk about maybe your role a little bit within the world of curiosity, spirituality, seekers, and whatever else.
Well, like you said, I am a senior publicist and host the podcast at New World Library. And New World Library was founded 40 years ago by Shakti Gawain and Mark Allen, around the time that Shakti wrote Creative Visualization, which is still one of our best-selling titles. And they've been public for 40 years now, really at the kind of leading edge of the new thought, curiosity. I love that you call it curiosity, spirituality realm. And so I've been there for 12 years and had a pretty amazing journey that brought me there that I'm sure we'll talk about today. And just am grateful to be a part of their team.
Absolutely. So for me, like, I'm really glad you latched onto my use of the word curiosity because it's super purposeful with me. Like, I talk about curiosity all the time as kind of like a driving philosophy and something that can guide somebody through even the mundane rigors of day-to-day life.
Yes.
You know, there's always something new that we can be learning all the time, even in mundane traffic, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm curious if you could talk just a little bit about what your spiritual upbringing was like, because I know that you're surrounded in this publishing world of spirituality books. So what was your own upbringing like?
Well, it's interesting. I definitely have been on a spiritual path for many years. And I grew up, my parents went to a non-denominational Christian church, and I used to I never connected with it really. And I used to just pray that they'd oversleep on Sundays, and I wasn't really that into church. And then as I was growing up, a couple people said to me, "You seem like a really spiritual person," but I didn't know what that meant. I'm like, I don't go to church. I just really kind of was shut to the whole idea. And then I discovered a book called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck that really shifted things for me and made me a curiosity seeker, awakened my curiosity and my desire to become a self-actualized person in the world. It was such an eye-opening thing for me to read at that time. And I feel like that, along with a book called Embraced by the Light, which is a near-death experience story that just cracked my heart wide open, like those two books kind of were the very beginning of my spiritual quest for me.
I can't say that my upbringing was very much different. I was we would go to church sporadically, and I had a lot of the same similar youth kind of issues, and just like the same kind of hoping that everything would go wrong on Sunday morning and that I would be free to go run off into the woods. So you have this superpower. You are super well known for one particular thing in the world. And your superpower is that you are the world's most foremost advocate of adult skipping as a form of exercise, right?
Yes, that's right.
So I have to tell you that I recently went on a walk with my dog, and I skipped for about a mile and a half with my little white Westie. And I have to tell you that I was pretty impressed with how I felt at the end. So after interacting with you, I did that, and I'm sure that people in my neighborhood thought that I was, having some kind of breakdown. But what led you to this fascinating physical fitness regimen?
Well, honestly, it's my hero's journey. It's my calling. It's something that when I first skipped as an adult, 18 years ago now, I had this vision that I should start a worldwide skipping movement. It was pretty amazing. And I didn't do it at first, which is kind of common in the hero's journey. A lot of times you refuse the call right away. And I was like, I had the vision and I didn't do it. And then 2 years later, just through an amazing series of synchronicities, I had gone for a run and it didn't go well. And I told a coworker about it, and she said, "Oh, that's funny." And then later she told me about her daughter asking her to skip with her at the mall. And she said, and I did it, but I thought adults don't skip. And the light bulb went off. And I was like, I really feel like skipping is so much fun. And it's silly that our culture says that adults don't do it because we all did it as kids. And it was right when the .com world was getting going. So my brother helped create a website for me called iskip.com. That's still skipping strong now. And it began this amazing journey where I was in Time and People and Newsweek, and it was really early social media before social media existed because I recruited head skippers. Everyone would read about it in the publicity, and then people had been skipping for years, and so they would sign up to be the head skipper in their hometown, and it was this incredible journey. And then I quit my job and thought I'd found my calling, and if I leapt, the net would follow. And the net didn't follow, and I skipped myself into financial ruin. And I entered the dark night of the soul part of my hero's journey, which when you first hear follow your bliss, like I didn't realize the full picture. I thought that I had found my bliss and it was going to be a straight shot upward, and that my calling was to become this, to have the whole world skip. And now, after going through the dark night of the soul and back up the other side, I realized that actually that journey was leading me right where I am now. And the experience that I've had along the way is just all related to kind of the work we do at New World Library. And we publish Joseph Campbell's books, and it's kind of my return was into New World Library. And then the skipping movement continues to go strong. And I lead the Austin Skipathon in Austin, Texas. We're about to have our 3rd annual one next year. And so it's been amazing. And it's what brought me where I am now.
So can you describe the moment of sheer glee or bliss that you felt when you realized that you had discovered something that was going to be a part of your life for decades to come?
I don't know if there's a moment of bliss, but I definitely just realizing like, wow, I found my calling, and that I've the unique contribution that I'm born to make, that I believe we all are, and it doesn't look anything like what I would have guessed, and it isn't financially self-supportive, but it's my thing. And so just knowing that really is a pretty amazing feeling.
And I know that your skipping has led you into the New World Library world of publishing, right? Like,
yes.
Did that experience lead you into your current job?
To some extent, I would say, just because of the way that it all unfolded. I mean, it's not a direct hit. Like, I was working at the Learning Annex in San Francisco when this job became available, but what I learned from the skipping movement was how it feels to use our life to make a difference. And that was what I wanted more than I wanted the whole world to skip. And so when I landed at New World Library, where every day, that's what I get to do by the energy that our books and authors are putting out into the world, it showed me what was possible, and that was the kind of job that I want. So it is connected to some degree.
Excellent. So, does anything in your own spiritual path, did that inspire you into leading into the job working for a place like New World Library? Was there like a spiritual dimension that was like pushing you into the spiritual world as far as working goes?
No, I think I've always been in that world to some degree, in the publishing world. So not necessarily the spiritual world, I wouldn't say. I think I've been on that path for 20 years. So of course I wanted to work in it, but it wasn't like anything specific.
Cool. So now I kind of want to talk a little bit more about New World Library itself, because I've been digging through your archives, and there is such an impressive catalog of work in there, and I just kind of want to talk about what your thoughts are on that. So do you have any favorite authors that you've worked with at New World Library?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, the current authors I'm working with at the time are often, I'll say, oh, this is just the best. Like, it's always a new rotation. But recently, an author named Scott Stabile came along into our lives. He wrote a book called Big Love: The Power of Living with a Wide Open Heart. And he is, like, in 20 years of publishing, him and his message in his book are like right book, right time, and what our world needs as I see it, more than anything I've ever worked on. So I big love him and his book. And then Shakti Gawain I was lucky enough when she was still mentoring people individually. She's not doing that anymore, but to work with her to do voice dialogue work and that kind of thing. And then an author named Sark, who wrote Succulent Wild Love is her most recent book, and Glad No Matter What. And then she has this kind of women's circle it's like this great group with Christina Rilo, who's a self-love expert, and Amy Ehlers, who wrote Big Fat Lies Women Tell Themselves, and Sam Bennett, who wrote Start Right Where You Are and Get It Done. Like, these amazing women authors are kind of my favorites.
Yeah, the author of Big Fat Lies Women Tell Them, I actually listened to your interview with her on your podcast just a couple days ago when I was out on a walk, and the energy was so good. And I have a 4-year-old daughter, and so these are the kinds of people that I want my daughter to grow up listening to. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
how do you think that she sees, how do you think she sees that movement as far as like raising young women?
Well, it's Amy's doing great work in that regard because she's a mom of two young girls. And so she has a podcast called The Mama Truth Show and that sort of thing. And she is recognizing the need to do it at an even younger age.
Do you have any like particular favorite books on New World Library that you would like to recommend to people?
Oh, like I said, Big Love.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a favorite. And The Power of Now is our best-selling book ever. And I mean, we sell like many, many copies every week since I've been there for 12 years, which is really it's encouraging to me because it means that many people are really starting to wake up to this new way of being in the world that our books and authors represent. Like The Power of Now kind of is the ultimate book in that regard for me. And then also that's a book called The Book of She by Sarah Avant Stover, which looks at the hero's journey from a feminine perspective. Joseph Campbell wrote it was mostly about men and their hero's journeys. There's not a lot of examples of feminine heroines. And so this book kind of like explores it from a feminine perspective.
Fantastic. So I can tell I love the hero's journey archetype. So whenever I teach young people about that, I'm always like, guys, you can all write your own stories. You can think about how your life fits within this model and this archetype of the hero, and you can be the hero. You can be the heroine. It's totally okay. And like you see all these like young light bulbs of creativity going off in their mind whenever you give them a model that they can follow, that they can travel, and they can explore within their own words, and they can become the artist. And giving them that is, I feel like, one of the most empowering things that I can do as a teacher as well. So
Yes.
I love that that you mentioned that so much. In that book, The Power of Now, that's Eckhart Tolle, isn't it?
Yes.
Awesome. I read about that book a lot in the Dan Harris book, 10% Happier, where he discusses Eckhart Tolle in so much detail. It's really a good read as well, because he's talking about how Eckhart Tolle is like the opposite of him. And he's like, wow, I really want to be more like Eckhart Tolle. And Eckhart Tolle just can't even explain to him how to reach that level because it's all about personal experience.
Yes.
So let's see here. You are highly involved with a company, New World Library, that puts information and ideas out into the world. And as someone who works with books and authors and information, you also work with a diverse range of spiritual perspectives every day. So you're exposed to all kinds of new ideas all the time. It's just swirling around you. So I'm curious if you have any ideas for how the publishing world thinks that teachers and schools and like maybe other educators can do like a better job of raising future generations to be like literate in these worlds that you work in.
Well, I'm not really that familiar with the way the school system works and like how much you are and aren't allowed to talk about that sort of thing in schools. But I am working with the author of a book called The Forgotten Art of Love right now. He's a cardiologist. His name's Dr. Amin Zadeh, and he in that book puts out a call that really we should be, love is an art. It's something that we practice. It's something that we choose. It's what our meditation and spiritual practices are helping us to develop. And that needs, in his opinion, to be a central part of curriculum from a very young age and really calling it that and learning to be more loving people, which I think is a really interesting idea.
Have you been exposed to anything within the mindfulness or meditation rooms that schools are doing around the country right now?
I have not personally.
There's a lot of schools in the country. Like I know that there's a big movement in Baltimore specifically where they are taking away their in-school suspension rooms and they're turning them into mindfulness rooms where they're teaching students how to meditate a little bit. And they're helping students to basically say, hello, I'm angry. Here's my anger, and then watch those moments as they kind of pass away. So it's a really fascinating thing. So maybe that could be something that you all could look into, see if there's any authors writing about that for future books.
Yeah, definitely.
Mindfulness in schools.
Yes.
Do you have any books that you would recommend for teachers to check out as far as like how to maybe like relate to young people dealing with anger or frustration?
Hmm. We don't really publish very much into like dealing with young people, but I think it always begins with ourselves. So and kind of the best way to deal with those. So we have like Make Peace with Your Mind, which is about dealing with the inner critic. And I think as we become more familiar with our own internal processes, it's easier to help kids.
I think that you're totally right. That's a great recommendation. So you also have a really cool podcast, New World Now.
Yeah.
What led you into wanting to get into the world of podcasting?
Honestly, it feels like it's the same inner creative nudge that told me to skip 18 years ago, nearly 20 years ago. It really was a deep sense of calling from within that kind of sparked the initial idea. And then Unity Online, around the time that I was exploring what would need to happen for me to start a podcast for New World Library, we were contacted by Unity Online Radio, and it was just it just opened up, it was meant to be. And I think that when you're dealing with something that's a calling and something you're meant to do in the world, that those synchronicities happen, and that's what happened. And now I've been doing it I've just finished my 27th episode. So it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love the fact that we're both podcasters with our own shows, and we're sitting here and we're talking on my podcast right now, but like I love listening to podcasts so much. It really I feel just connected to just this infinite world of ideas out there. And I got to hear your voice for a lot of time before I actually talked to you for this podcast. So I was like kind of getting used to like who you are as a personality, and it was just a lot of fun. And your same energy just comes through in all of your episodes, and I read all your little reviews, and people like love your podcast. So I was so glad that you were willing to come on mine.
Oh, thanks.
What are some of your favorite episodes that you've done that you would recommend maybe some first-time listeners to check out on New World Now?
Again, it seems like after every one I do, I'm like, that was the best.
I know,
like, this is the best
so hard.
Christmas ever. I would suggest Scott Stabile, Big Love. I did Big Love and also Big Love in Action. The Big Love in Action one is really about how our positive energy and love does make a difference in this world, and it's really all that we can do to help shift things. So I really loved that one. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now while I'm talking to remember back. The very first one I did was with Mark Allen, who is the founder of New World Library. And his story is amazing, and he's amazing. He calls himself a type Z person because he loves to take naps. He doesn't work on Mondays. He comes in at 1, and encourages success with ease. So he's amazing. So that's a good one to just get to know New World Library. And what else? Barbara Marx Hubbard is pretty amazing. She's 84. She wrote Conscious Evolution, and she really helps frame what's going on in the world. And again, how it's not really a luxury to self-actualize anymore and to do this work and to evolve. Like, it's really what we're each being called to do at some level with what's going on in the world. And until we do, I think that the craziness that's playing out on the external stage is going to continue.
How have you grown most as a person since you started your podcast? Like, what has it done for you in your day-to-day life?
Well, the very first episode that I did with Mark, we had to start over because I was so nervous. Like the way I said it was that my anxiety was stronger than my presence. And I could really see that was what was going on, but there was nothing I could do about it because it was new, and I hadn't done it before, and there's mine's timed. So it was, you really have to end at a certain time. And now 27 episodes later, to have watched myself go through the evolution to now where it's like, I'm actually excited about it. And I know what I'm doing more, and it's like practice makes perfect, kind of thing. Like it's become really enjoyable. And just watching myself go through that whole evolution of starting something new and being really scared and then finding my way through it.
What's your preparation regimen like? Because you're working primarily with authors, And
Yes.
so authors, whenever they put out a new body of work, sometimes can be 200, 300, 400 pages. So like, how do you get ready for these, for your conversations that you lead?
Well, every book that I do the interviews about are a book that we've published at New World Library. And so I'm pretty familiar with their work already. But what's cool about the podcast is when I was doing publicity for books, I wouldn't read the whole thing. Necessarily, I wouldn't have time. And with these podcasts, I've actually read all 27 books, or there's actually 24, I think, because I did a couple doubles. But I've read them from cover to cover, and I was looking at the whole, and then I put them on my bookshelf, and I was looking at the whole body of work, and I was like, wow, like because of this, I have so many more tools in my toolbox. And for me, it's about how do we take all of these ideas and really ground them in our lives and put them into and make a difference in the world because of it. And I feel like by doing this podcast, it's like a whole graduate level course or something that I've gotten in the process.
Do you do a bunch of annotating as well in advance inside the books?
Yeah, I go through and I underline I read the whole thing and I underline, and then I go back, and whatever from the underlines most calls to me after reading the whole thing, I put together a map of what I want to ask. And usually I have way more questions than I'm able to get to in my 26 minutes. But that's the process.
Absolutely. I love it. Who are some of your favorite interviewers? Like who moves you? Like whose shows do you listen to? Like what techniques have you picked up from some other experts?
I really like Krista Tippett and On Being. That's
Me too.
one of the
Me
main
too.
ones. And I'm actually not a huge podcast listener. I don't have a lot of time for it. So I've been listening to her mostly in the car. And now that Oprah has the Super Soul podcast, I listened to that. I'm always interested in transitions and, like how interacted, like saying or not, or being quiet and that kind of thing. It's just fun to listen to it from more of a host's perspective.
So, what are some of your own goals with regards to spirituality or curiosity for the rest of your life? Like, where do you want to go next?
Well, my main goal with spirituality is just to be fully present in the moment so that I am able to say yes to whatever shows up. Like that's the overarching, like big spiritual goal for me in my work, I feel like. But as far as kind of my work in the world, when I started the skipping movement, it was actually a double calling, and it was like start skipping and write about it. And so I started a book that I've been working on for 18 years as I've gone through my hero's journey. At the beginning, it was just like, come on, everybody, skip like me and life will be great. I kept trying to write it as I was going along. And now I feel like I've started and stopped it and put it in a drawer. And it's been this like epic experience. And so I'm just now coming back to it again, like stepping back up to the plate after having gotten a draft and shared it with New World Library and having it not be right. And realizing that it's really because get to the point in my journey where I'm able to tell the story, it's going to come through, but it's also it's a long process. So getting my story down and writing a book myself is ultimately something that I would love to do.
Nice. Do you have any like spiritual affiliations that you do on a day-to-day basis?
A spiritual practice wise?
Yeah.
Well, I actually started a meditation group at New World Library. And so we don't do it daily. We do every Monday and every Friday. We get together and we meditate for 10 minutes. So that's like bookends. Like I actually have that. And I have a mantra that I learned at a meditation practice that I use when I meditate. That's an equanimity meditation. It says, no matter how I wish things might be, things are as they are. May I be balanced and non-reactive no matter what comes, and really feeling what that feels like in your body, to have something intense and then just to be calm. And so I've used that for several years now, and that has been the most powerful practice for me personally. Because either when I'm not being equanimous, like when I snap at my fiance, and then I can say, oh, that was, oops, that wasn't balanced and not reactive. But it also is like a muscle where it's more accessible because I've practiced what that feels like. So when something intense happens, I can draw on that.
Do you still struggle at all, like with meditation practice?
Oh, yes, of course.
So why is it so hard? It seems so simple to just sit there and shut up and just pay attention to the internal and look inward. But why is it so hard? Like, do you have any reasons why it's really hard for you? Because I have my own reasons.
Well, I just did an interview with the author of Opening to Meditation, and it was funny because I was saying like it's so hard and it's so scary, and she said actually it's not. It's your ego that thinks it's so hard and so scary, and actually it's this magical world that you could explore if your ego lets go. So.
So, what would you recommend to maybe some ordinary folks listening who are interested in meditation? Like, do you have any meditation books that you would like for them to maybe check out?
Definitely Opening to Meditation would be perfect by Diana Lang. And I did just interview her on New World Now as well. So there's a podcast available. But it's just a very gentle, there can be so many rules and different types of meditation. And, we just look at a wall or we focus on our breath and I've always thought, well, isn't it? I mean, I appreciate the nuances, but isn't it kind of all the same thing? We're trying to connect to the same place within. And that's really this author's take on it. And she just makes it so simple.
Awesome. So I'm curious if you can recommend maybe like some of your favorite books like of all time. And it doesn't have to just be within the world of spirituality, but things that really just have spoken to you throughout different points in your life.
One of my favorite books ever is Callings by Greg Lavoie, which is really about the things we're called to do in life. And as someone who has found at least one and many more of my callings, like he's helped me recognize that that's what's kind of happening as that's happening. And Succulent Wild Woman by Sark, who I mentioned earlier, was for me, it was just a permission slip for my inner wild woman to come out to play that I read in my late 20s. So that one was really powerful and freeing. And I mentioned The Road Less Traveled, which is just that one is a classic as well.
Awesome. Well, Kim, I am really grateful to you and your time and your work and your enthusiasm. And I love your show, New World Now, and I think that everybody should go and check it out. And I'm curious if you can tell people where to find you on the internet if they want to know more.
Well, subscribing on iTunes to New World Now would be the simplest way, probably. And then you can find New World Library at newworldlibrary.com, and we're on all social media. I run all of the social media channels. Christy is our Twitter goddess and our Pinterest goddess, but we have a great team and do love social media there. And iskip.com is the skipping movement website if you want to check out the skipping movement.
Awesome. Kim Corbin, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the Classical Ideas podcast, and I look forward to learning more from you and your podcast and New World Library in the future.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. See you later.
Skip on.
The Classical Ideas podcast is written and performed by me, Greg Soden. Original music is composed and performed by Derek Strybig. His music can be found at www.wearewarmmusic.com. Thanks for listening.